Oh!
The PlayStation 1, the early 3D console that couldn't do 3D very well, but did it anyway. The console was the birthing ground for a lot of things video game related, and one of them was crazy Japan-only horror games that feeble Western minds could never comprehend. And we're gonna look at 5 of these crazy Japan-only horror games that feeble Western minds could never comprehend. Because I found 5 good ones, and more importantly, while they are crazy Japan-only horror games that feeble Western minds could never comprehend, they are completely playable. Either straight out of the box or with a special method that the fellow weebologist discovered fairly recently, that allows us, feeble Westerners, to use technological magic to make the archaic runes of Japan language completely-ish understandable. A method that I'll show you at the end of the video. So, let's have a look at 5 crazy Japan-only horror games that feeble Western minds could never comprehend. Released on the 22nd of June 2000, Boku no Natsu ya Tsunami is a mind-bending thriller about a virile Japanese man retelling the story of how he once escaped the Hell or possibly the Matrix. In this Hell/Matrix world, the man has been transformed and has become trapped in the flesh prison of a 9-year-old child. A child that is being kidnapped and taken to a gulag in the Japanese countryside. Inside the gulag, our virile Japanese man turned 9-year-old boy must navigate the political landscape of a Japanese internment camp and make friends with both his fellow inmates, but also the guards, known to us only as Uncle and Auntie. We will experience such horrors as a present father figure and meaningful interactions with other human beings. And we will be immersed in this world where we are not the heroes, but the victims. And we are completely at the mercy of Uncle and Auntie, and they are not merciful captors. They will force Boku-kun to perform such twisted tasks for them, such as fishing with Uncle, eating home-cooked meals, and doing chores. The main gameplay loop consists of Boku-kun waking up in the morning, being forced outside to salute the great leader, and then be interrogated and then try and make a run for it and escape, only to be caught by Uncle again by the end of the day and then forced inside for another interrogation. In between these escape attempts, Boku-kun is given work assignments, but doing the work is only half the task. See, figuring out how and where to do the work is a game in its own. Boku-kun's captors speak exclusively in anime-con language and strange hieroglyphics, and the player only has till sundown each day to decipher these codes and make it to the destination they're supposed to be at. Okay, yeah, right, I'm not fooling anyone, am I? Boku no Natsu ya Tsunami is not a horror game, it is the exact opposite. I'd even hesitate to call it a game. I mean, but it's not a simulator either, it's a memory prompt. Playing a game about being a boy on vacation reminds me of being a boy on vacation, because even though I have never been a Japanese boy, sent away to stay with his uncle for the summer in the Japanese countryside and run an insect fight club and eat lemon ice cream, it still resonates with me. And that's kinda neat. See, this game is technically just the player waking up, running off to one of the 10 tiny areas in the game and clicking a button only to return home to sleep and repeat the same loop the next day. But man, I don't read or speak Japanese, so beyond recognizing the characters' names and konnichiwa, I understood nothing. And yet I understood everything. Every time I talked to a character, I had a rough idea of what they were saying, because there was a visual build-up to what was about to unfold. And the quiet and nostalgia-riddled atmosphere and intriguing level design also made me want to figure out what was going on. Even though what I had to figure out wasn't a secret plot to assassinate the president like a normal video game. But Auntie asking Boku-kun which kind of ice cream he wanted. Yes, making an ice cream choice at the end of the in-game day is the highlight of the game. And I kept playing for another day and another day and another day because I wanted more ice cream choices. And I wanted to find a stick to knock the beehive out of the way and make a friend to knock over that tree and help Uncle in his pottery shop and play with Girl Chan and figure out where Strange Boy was and where Big Girl were going every day. Because while all these things are mundane as fuck on the surface, they are still video gamey things, and most importantly I wanted to do them because game design good. Boku no Natsu ya Tsunami, it's not a horror game, but go play it anyways, even though you don't speak Japan, because it's just made so good you can figure it out anyways. Released on the 26th of March 1998, it is a full 3D game with full 3D controls, but being an early PS1 game, this means that the left stick runs forwards and backwards and turns left and right, and the shoulder buttons look up and down and strafe left and right. This is something that you probably could get used to, but 1998 was 21 years ago and we have emulation now, which, for one, lets me play with a more comfortable controller, in my opinion, but also more importantly in this context, lets me remap the controls so I don't have to navigate my surroundings like a diabetic with low blood sugar. With the controls mapped proper, it's time to get into It, which is a game about a group of Japanese high schoolers getting trapped inside their school with a killer. A killer that might be one of the students actually. It's up to us, a virile Japanese boy named, I don't know, Plate McBullcut, to solve puzzles, run from possessed killer schoolgirls, save our big titty anime girlfriend, save our big titty anime school teacher who's way hotter, and get the fuck out of there. We do this by navigating the fully rendered polygon 3D school and interacting with stuff to advance the story. The game is 100% linear, but I don't know, there's just something aesthetic about it. Strolling through the empty halls, examining objects, talking to the other students, and staring into the mirror in the bathroom, and getting a good look at Plate McBullcut's soulless face. There's just something so aesthetic about it. Like if I hadn't played this and I one day watched a vaporwave video called something like Japanese School Future Funko Trunk, and this ran in the background as the game's animation with like a scanline filter on, and someone told me that the animation was created for that soundtrack, I would believe them because it looks like that. But, is this a good game? Probably not. I mean, to me it is because I'm a pretentious douchebag. If it looks interesting, give it a try. Next.
The one person to shine a ray of hope onto this long period of darkness is Pachamama, the daughter of the first president of Maruza. The people started the democratic movement with her as a symbol of freedom. The movement expanded nationwide thanks to her warm personality. Tomorrow is the Maruzan Independence Day, and the way of the democratization is just reaching a climax. I have taken this flight to cover Pachamama, the leader of the democratic movement.
So, what happens when a Japanese video game corporation wants to penetrate a new market and expand their business? Well, if they are Nintendo, they do their homework, rework the product they're selling so it better appeals to their prospective audience, and team up with local forces to sell that product. And if they're Sony in the late 90s and they're hoping to get into the Argentinian video market with their brand spanking new PS2 system, they make an English language game with Japanese text and release it exclusively in Japan on the PS1. This sounds too stupid to be real, but on the 1st of June 2000, that's exactly what they did when they released Aconcagua. Aconcagua opens up as our main man, Gato, a Japanese journalist, is on a press tour, but this isn't just any press tour. Gato is a part of a press corps of international journalists following a woman, Pachamama, a revolutionary who was trying to peacefully overthrow the military regime that originally deposed her democratically elected father. Gato wants to get a scoop before anyone else, attempts to approach Cooking Mama while they're on a plane en route to their next destination, but just as her handler denies his requests, the plane crashes into the mountain, Aconcagua, hence the game's name, and then the game begins. Gato manages to survive the crash and then goes about doing the only thing he can do, attempt to get the fuck off the mountain, and he does this through a control scheme that's a lot like a point-and-click adventure. Well, actually it's exactly like a point-and-click adventure. We the player move the cursor around the screen, and clicking on a non-interactable area will make Gato go there, and clicking on an interactable area like this dying man over here will open a dialog box where Gato either gives his thoughts on the thing we're clicking on, or if it's a person, talk to that person. Unfortunately, the person in front of us only speaks Spanish. To begin with, I kinda thought that this was just flavor text, but then something happened. Around the corner I found Patchy Slot, and when interacting with her she started speaking Spanish in confusion due to the crash, and then switched to English when she realized that you're speaking to Gato, and then she joined the party, and that clicked for me. The Spanish-speaking guy we just talked to earlier that we couldn't understand Pachinko Mama can probably talk to him and understand what she says. And she can. And that is what the game is about. Not specifically about talking to dying Spanish guys, but that whole thing about using the correct character with the correct skills to solve puzzles. And trust me, it gets a little more involved than just talking to an NPC with a certain character to get an item to open a box. Within an hour from this point, the team that we're in control of swells from 2 to 5, and the puzzles also swell in their complexity. Though it is in this game's favor. They never become confusing or stupid. Almost. There is a bit where we have to throw an oily sack on a floor and then light the door on fire before we can open it for some reason. Which is kinda dumb, but it's still kinda straightforward. And the larger puzzle as a whole, which has us use a knife character to cut down some flight fabric to make a sling for a guy, then do the aforementioned oil fire trick to get to the entrance of the cockpit of the downed plane, and using Mountain Man to get a battery off a cliff for Engineer Guy to rig to the radio set so that Patty Cakes can contact the rebels in the area, is pretty fucking great. Also, did I mention that the entire game has English voice acting and it's only the text boxes that are in Japanese, which doesn't really make the game unplayable since everything is visually communicated very well? 'Cause it is. Anyways, after Petroleum Mouse successfully contacts the rebels, they show up in a helicopter, but it turns out that they are not the rebels. And they really want to kill everyone on the mountain so that there won't be any survivors of the plane crash to whistleblow while the plane crash happened, and all that usual conspiracy jazz. And as the attack chopper starts firing at our motley crew of heroes and they slow-mo dive out of the way, I think it's time that we leave them on this side of this cold mountain and move on to something way hotter. Mermaids. Released sometime in the year 2000, Ninyo no Rakuin, or Mark of the Mermaids, starts much like the last game we look at, with a plane crash. But unlike Aconcagua, this plane does not crash down in the Andes Mountains, but in the sea near a tropical island. Nice? No. Because this island is full of crazy cultists that serve a Cthulhu-like mermaid god, and the people who survive the plane crash, our protagonists, are to be that Cthulhu-like mermaid god's next meal. So how do we not become that? Well, we take charge of our protagonists and guide them through level after level of tactical turn-based RPG, but unlike most other tactical turn-based RPGs, the goal of Ninyo no Rakuin is often to sneak/run away from the enemies instead of tactically fighting them. And if there is fighting, it is usually in the guerrilla stay away from me, fight them off with a stick long enough to accomplish whatever task is at hand. And it is very good, but very tough. And that's all there is to say about it. Well, actually there is a lot more to say about it, but I think this game might be too hot for YouTube. There's a lot of naked mermaid gore, so I'm not gonna risk it. Okay? Moving on. And what we're moving on to is the honorable mentions. Released on the 24th of June 1999, Persona 2 Innocent Sin is a Persona game, and I've already talked about it in a video about good games that have fan translations, which is why it's an honorable mention, because it's not a Japan-only game anymore, and there's also an official English port for the PSP. Released on the 30th of June 1998, Deep Fear is a Resident Evil clone about a man who becomes trapped in a futuristic submarine where plant zombie monsters happen, and he must then do Resident Evil clone thingies and fight his way through the submarine and get the fuck out of there, but also probably take down a shadow government that rules the world. But why is a Resident Evil clone on this list? Well, despite being a Resident clone, it's actually quite good. While other clones like Carrier for the Dreamcast would later become notable for just being mindless and semi-competent knockoffs, earlier clones like Deep Fear all had a gimmick of some sort. And while the gimmick doesn't work out in a game like Countdown Vampires, where every enemy has to be staked after they are downed, the gimmick, or rather gimmicks, work out pretty well in Deep Fear. See, we are underwater and the sub is sinking or failing or whatever, or it has holes in it, so water and air plays a crucial part of the plot, but also the gameplay itself. It's It's actually a hella neat way to get around all that ludonarrative dissonance shit. See, I can be an artsy critic fuck manboy hoe also. And fiddling with the air pressure and such makes for some pretty tense moments, as you have to shut off oxygen in one area to turn it on in another area. But then you have to run through a room without oxygen before your breath runs out, and there are also monsters there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And if it wasn't for just one giant problem, it would definitely be on this list. That problem being that this is a PS1 Hidden Gems list, and Deep Fear was developed internally at Sega and released exclusively for the Sega Saturn, which was like a PlayStation but worse in every way. And the game also came out in Europe, and even in Japanese the entire game is in English, which also kind of defeats the purpose of a list of Japan-only Japanese games. But if Deep Fear isn't the 5th pick on our Hidden Gems list, then what is? Well, let's move on to our next, our final, and the best of this video, and one of my favorite games of all time. Released on the 23rd of December 1998, our 5th and final pick and one of my favorite games of all time is Tsunami Falls. It's a game that I've talked a lot about before, and I've made several videos about it before, but there was no way that I could make an underrated Japan-only video without putting this on the top of my list, regardless of how many other lists I've put it on before. And hey, I gotta do it because there's still not a fully done translation patch out there for this game. So I have to continue to preach the gospel. And alright, what is the gospel? Well, I'm glad you asked. Tsunami Falls stars dumb-looking high school boy Matthew as he is awoken by a phone call. It is his friend and possible love interest Winona on the other end of the line, and Winona informs dumb-looking high school boy Matthew that his other possible love interest, Emma, has gone missing. As Matthew gets his thing together and heads out to search for Emma, he's stopped by his, for all intents and purposes, uncle, Nas, who tells him to come inside the store. Inside the store, Matthew runs into the local chief of police Morgan, who tells Matthew that another girl from Matthew's school, Kathy Flannery, was found badly injured this morning. And for some reason, Matthew, a dumb-looking high school boy, accompanies Morgan to the hospital on official police business to interrogate/ask Kathy questions. However, at the hospital, Morgan realizes that he brought an actual child with him on official adult police business and tells Matthew to wait outside, which he does. And then Kathy dies, and Matthew is right outside listening to everything. Morgan then comes out and then just fucks off, and then Matthew also decides to fuck off, but on his way out he's approached by Dr. Totally Not a Cultist Murderer Man, who casually lets Matthew know, still an actual child, that he will be at a biker bar at 2200, and that Matthew, still, mind you, an actual child, should totally come by so they can talk. Matthew, seemingly as confused by this as I am, kinda just waddles out of the hospital and then runs into Winona, who is kind of just there with his car. They agree to meet up later, and then Matthew, still an actual child, drives off to the police station to further assist Morgan with the investigation into the mysterious death of Kathy Flannery and the disappearance of Emma, I don't really recall her last name. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the opening of Tsunami Falls. From here on out, we follow Matthew on the investigation to the beat of a beautiful soundtrack as he journeys through a fully rendered 3D open world in this absolute gem of a game. It is a tale that is full of boat adventuring, fist-fighting bears, interesting characters, cute little stalker boys, car chases, cults, and armed robberies. And it is, just amazing. And you should go play it. Now! But how can you? This game and all the other games are Japanese, and you don't speak that. I mean, you can play Persona 2 because it got an English port eventually, and Aconcagua and Deep Fear are mostly in English, and Boku no Natsuyamu tells most of its story through visual and audio cues, and Tsunami Falls has several translation patches that sort of work, but I totally know what you mean. And here it is, introducing the Hikiko Method TM.
Here are the materials you'll need to use the Hikiko Method. A Japanese video game, a separate monitor, a Samsung Galaxy S7 with a good camera on it, with Google Home and Google Translate downloaded on it, a tripod with a phone mount grip, one Google Chromecast, and one 3-pound bag of expired peanut M&Ms. Optional. First, hook up your external monitor and put it in a place where you can see it clearly. 2. Take your Google Chromecast and find a USB port on your TV, then plug it in. 3. Using your phone, pair your device using Google Home, or in some cases, you may just be able to cast your screen directly to the Chromecast device. Make sure you follow all the manufacturer instructions to get it paired. Step 4. Once you've mirrored your phone screen to the Chromecast, attach the phone to the tripod mount and line it up with your TV in the areas in which text most frequently appears in the game. Step 5. Launch Google Translate and set it up to wherever it says Japanese to English and then hit the camera button. See that little eyeball? Make sure it's open. That's the live translation feature, wherein the application attempts to translate all the Japanese kanji on the screen and superimpose other languages over it in a hodgepodge jarbled fashion that sometimes makes no sense. Step 6, kick back and relax and eat all those expired M&Ms because you just put NIS out of business, baby. An alternative method is leaving the phone where it is and using its snap feature where you can take individual still shots and then manually translate what you need. Then put the phone to rest when you're not using it. I'm not gonna tell you what to do. Choose your own destiny, pal. And that, my friends, is the Hikiko method. That was the Hikiko method. If you see anyone online using the Hikiko method, well, at least send me a penny on Patreon and everything's square. You have to say the words Hikiko method when you use it. That's really the only condition I have. Thank you for your time.
So, that was 5 underrated Japan-only PS1 horror games, 2 runners-up, and a method of accessing these sure to be your future favorite weeaboo games. As always, I hope you liked what you saw, and if you have any suggestions for a future underrated horror video, feel free to comment down below or hit me up on Twitter. For now, nothing. So, until next time, bye bye!